Stay hungry, stay foolish.
So now on the Innovation Show, it's a great pleasure to welcome Larry Bass, CEO and founder of Shinawil, who's given us great shows like The Apprentice, Dragon's Den, and the latest addition to the family, which is Dancing with the Stars, coming to our screen soon. So Larry Bass, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Aidan. Good morning.
So it'd be great before we talk about where the industry is today and where it's going, talk about your how you got to where you are today and how you've got to these amazing shows that you've brought to our screens.
Well, I had a very checkered road to where I am today. I started out in the business, believe it or not, age 13 as a DJ in pirate radio, all because somebody didn't turn up to do their show. My brother had been involved in pirate radio and out in Dunleary, and I was out helping by answering the phones and just hanging out, thinking it was really cool to be in a radio studio age 13, and somebody didn't turn up. I was elected to go on. I went on, and one thing led to another. I ended up, working in various different radio stations all through my teenage years, all the way up to some of the biggest pirates in Dublin, including Radio Nova. And allied with that, I also started doing DJ in the local area, whether it was for a 21st birthday or a wedding or other functions, and then started supplying DJs and got involved in doing sound for fashion shows and stage shows, and that started introducing things like lighting and everything else. But I was always involved in, the setup and the behind the scenes production of various things, be it any type of event, from, as I said, fashion shows or school shows, right up to including rock and roll production. And that brought me down to a route of more and more of that when I left school. And it was all going well until I realised, sort of towards my end of my 20s, that working the way I wasn't going to be something that was going to be very fruitful in the future. So I decided to go back and try and educate myself properly. And I went as a mature student, applied for, at the time, it was College of Commerce in Rathmines to do communications. And it's now DIT in Angel Street. Wasn't successful year one, but I managed to get into a foundation course in Coláiste, did that for a year, and then moved over to DIT, where I did a 4-year degree in communications. Finished that and ended up working with a few different producers during my time in college, just to earn a few bob. And then I helped an old colleague from Radio Days in setting up a new production company and post-production facility. Decided that post-production wasn't the world that I want to live in. And I set up Shinawil Productions, essentially just to do a documentary for a band that I'd done sound with in previous years. But I knew their story had never been told. So a guy I'd met in college in Coláiste, Simon Gibney, and myself set up Shinawil as a vehicle really to do a documentary on the Dublin band Aslan. And the documentary and the soundtrack from the documentary, Made in Dublin, actually was one of their best albums. It launched us as a production company. It got very well received, and eventually I started doing other things. And, then we sort of got into the formatted television world when I stumbled upon the rights to do Pop Stars at a conference in Las Vegas. Eventually talked a few people into getting involved, everyone from Simon Cowell, Louis Walsh and RTE, and the show was a big success, and that paved the way for us doing many other shows, including The Apprentice, Dragon's Den, MasterChef, The Voice of Ireland, Home of the Year, and now Dancing with the Stars. And we've done other shows as well. What Are You Eating was a new show we developed last year for RTE, and we've a couple of other shows working now with pretty much every broadcaster on the island.
Just going back to your childhood and I suppose your love of live production and production in general, like you think of in life, there's black pen people, there's highlighter people and red pen people. I don't know if you've heard this analogy, but they say the red pen people are just people looking at an idea and just go, no, that won't work. Highlighter people are who enhance it. And then you are very much a black pen person who just goes, what if we did this? And you just draw it up on the board. And, you know, when you said post-production, that kind of resonated with me, that you weren't, I'm not the highlighter person. I'm not that. I actually want to be in the nuts and bolts of the vision and bring the vision to life.
Yeah, I think I'm the classic entrepreneur. I would drive some people to complete distraction. I don't go around life with a rear view mirror. I'm always trying to look forward. I'm always trying to look big. I read a book years ago and it had a big influence on my thinking. It was called The Art of Thinking Big. And for me, it just says it all. You know, coming from small town Ireland, where everything is small in comparison to the world of media, especially the changing world of global media, being small means you will remain tiny. And the only way you can actually strike out and take your part in the global village that is a changing media landscape is think huge, think absolute global, think big. And that served us well in a lot of our productions. We were never afraid of taking on big shows. We were never afraid of taking on big enterprises. And, you know, the challenge of, you know, how can you possibly do a show as good as it is in the US or the UK on a fraction of the budget? Well, we've always managed to do it, and I think that is key to getting going. I think if you allow the negativity of the people who will get stuck into the detail stop something before you start, you're in trouble. I'm the exact opposite. Sometimes I start things that shouldn't be started because we haven't filled in some detail, like getting finance or other parts. But that, you know, we've been lucky as well. But so a degree of luck and a degree of thinking big. Yeah,
but that mindset of starting is where we all are today. Like businesses, big corporations, even if it's not in their culture to start things, they need to create little units or little pockets of innovation within the company that do that. And they go, you know what, there's no business plan for this. We're going to try it. It's going to cost this much. We were going to go this general direction anyway. And by failing, if we do fail, we've saved ourselves millions or hundreds of thousands by not investing big time in it anyway. And that mindset, you were very, very early with that, because that's what I was kind of getting at with your childhood, essentially, when you're 13. What was like, is there a spark there? So you mentioned the book Thinking Big when you were later, but was there something in your early childhood that you went, actually, that was a kind of a moment for me that I went, this is who I am, or this is where my mind is?
No, I think one of the key things, it's not really a sort of a personality thing, but it was certainly a big impactful event in my life. I had a fairly idyllic childhood thanks to hardworking parents, but my mum passed away when I was 12, and my world completely, you know, just went upside down, and all the rules that I would have known pretty much up until that day went out the window, and a whole new set of, well, this is a different world and this is how you've got to go out and attempt to do things differently. So when things happened, because I didn't have mum at home and dad was out working, you just got on and did things. So I think I certainly gained an ability to think for myself much earlier than probably most people have to. And I think that has served me well. Whether it served me correctly or properly, well, history will tell. But so far, it's managed to serve me well, because I do believe you have to have an ability to make a decision, and you've got to get on with it. You've got to trust your instincts. You've got to trust your own innate ability in things, or nothing will happen. And I think in terms of some of those bigger productions and bigger issues, you make a decision somewhere along the way and you get on with it. And sometimes those decisions are not right, but you still get on with it, and you've got to try and do remedial work on the way. But I think that certainly was key. I've later, we're on the innovation show, and it's only later in life I've started to realize the importance of, I suppose, everything from bootstrapping a new idea or setting something up or trying to do it differently and setting up and giving people the license to go off and try something, go off and do it differently. No one's going to shoot you for trying. And also bringing in play, I suppose one of the key rules in innovation is, fail fast. Don't pour money down the drain at something. When you're in a small business, you don't have the luxury of lots of money to pour down the drain. So you do have to try and fail fast or get going.
Yeah.
And I think that's been interesting. And now we've benefited as a company in actually making innovation part and parcel of our culture.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. We're trying to get everyone in the company thinking about innovation, thinking about how can we do everything we're doing different? Is there a smarter way? Don't just do it because you've been doing the same way. In a world where who knows what we'll be watching or what we'll be watching it on or how we'll find that content in the future. And that's changing so fast. As content makers, we have to be open to being able to pivot our whole world into that changing environment. And I think that's key to trying to keep an eye on the future as you get through the day-to-day, which is always the difficult balancing act. But I think as a CEO of a business, as an owner of a business, I think I need to live a little bit more in the future than in the past. I certainly need to live a little bit more in the future than the present if I'm to grow the business. If we're happy with the business just stagnating and tipping along, you don't necessarily need to spend so much time on the future. You can just get on with what you're doing day to day. But certainly I think our business it's future dependent.
Yeah, and it's so evident that that mindset comes. It's the shadow of a leader who infects the rest of the team for the better. And you've done that with the innovation mindset. And I suppose one term that's used a lot with a lot of innovators at the moment is hustle, to have some hustle. And that event in your childhood makes you have to hustle, because you have to hustle to, I suppose, fill the void in your life, but also feel the passion that you seem to have and the passion to create, and you've done nothing but that all the way. But the point being, as a CEO, within a company you can have pockets of excellence, but if the CEO isn't bought into that innovation mindset, it's not going to be an innovative company.
I think it's a real challenge, trying to change the culture of a company, and even understanding the word culture. Until we did a program with Enterprise Ireland a number of years ago, I think it was 2013, called Leadership for Growth, and it was a really helpful program to allow me upskill my own, I suppose, managerial skills, business leader skills, and also set the company on a ship heading for growth, as opposed to just existing in the way we were within Ireland. And now we sort of, how do we grow faster? How do we grow better? Innovation is now another development into that sort of path. But it was on that program that I first sort of really got to know the meaning of the word culture within business. And it's a very, very powerful part of business. Culture eats everything else every day, all day. And we are not fully there yet. Our culture is something we're working on. We're trying to instill, fun place to work, but a challenging place to work. We want to instill a culture where people come into the company, get on, move up in their career, get a chance to actually sit at the top table in terms of career paths. And also, I nearly expect people to want to be doing something in terms of learning and growth. And that sort of tells a lot about somebody. If they're not interested in doing training programs, they're not interested in learning new things, well, it sort of pigeonholes people into a certain place. And the ones who certainly grow and take leadership roles are the ones who make it their business to actually improve their skills. And so all of that combined with a philosophy of not standing still. I mean, I think it's key to, even in our business, on our domestic output, every show we do year in, year out, if we're lucky enough to get recommissioned, if we just plod along and do the same show, it won't last, for the number of years that we hope shows will last. So we really need to fire up the team that if we're going to do a series again, it needs to be better. It needs to be bigger if possible. It needs to be, we need to be doing things different from what we did the year before. So from a viewer point of view, they're seeing a progression. They're seeing some change. Obviously, if there's fantastic parts of a program that the viewers love, well, you need to be very careful about tweaking that. You need to make the bits they love better.
And that leads me to that question. I was going to ask, how do you balance the innovation or the change or the incremental change or mixing it up with, don't fix it if it ain't broken? And you're kind of going, how do I balance that? And how do you measure that balance?
It's difficult to measure it until you've done it. So sometimes you just have to have the courage to do something and hope that, through a various means, feedback is important. Feedback from your teams, test things with your customers. Our customers tend to be broadcasters. Have the conversation. Make sure you have got the ability to ask them what do they want to see different. An awful lot of people probably go around the business and just assume things. Well, that's not necessarily going to be good enough in the future. I think we have to not assume anything and constantly ask and constantly get feedback. And feedback can sometimes be difficult, to get, and I find it's even harder for people to give. But I think giving them the license to give you feedback is a very interesting thing to do. Yeah. It licenses people to engage. It licenses them to feel that they have an input. It licenses them to maybe correct things that, frankly, they weren't sure about what to say. But it gets you into a conversation. And at the end of the day, we're in the business of telling stories, and those stories can go to a different place if people don't keep them on track or don't, read the signs of where somebody wants the story to go. And what you don't want to do in a very big production is you think you know the story that the broadcaster network wants, and then you go off and make that story, and then you go back and deliver it, and it's actually a different story. So it's really, really it's quite simple in a way, but I think you've got to be able to have the ability to connect and communicate and have those conversations early and often. And I think that's part of it. And
one of the things, I always noticed Shinawil very active on early adopters with social media, and it's a great way to, I suppose, in real time see how is it being reacted to, how's the content being reacted to. But also you use the analogy of the ship on the ocean, and getting out there and not remaining stagnant, having a destination that will change. But the ocean today, if it's the ecosystem is changing dramatically, and there's icebergs coming up all over the place, new little ships appearing all the way in your way almost, and there's fragmentation all over the place, and that means that you have to behave differently. And you see a lot of the networks not changing how they behave. And that onus is almost put on the production companies when maybe it shouldn't be.
Yeah, we're entering a world in terms of industry in revolutions. I think we've come through the industrial revolution. We've come through into the digital age, but we really are entering a phase now where I think we're practically leaving the digital age, and we're entering a phase that I don't know if anyone's coined the phrase yet for that new name. But we're certainly entering a phase that is more connected to the individual than ever before. I think industrialization took the individual out of a lot of key processes, a lot of key thinking, and it was that industrial age drove a lot of policy and a lot of the key thinking and management. Yet now we're in a world where the democratization of especially social media and I would say not social media but digital commerce, connecting the individual to their whole online world, their online stores, their habits, their desires, everything that sort of now is catered to an individual via these interconnected honeycombs of digital companies. It's now a new world where the power is back in the consumer, and it's real power. the most switched on companies are the companies who listen to their customers, and especially when customers can react instantaneously right now about a product, a place, a service, and the ones who don't react are, I suppose, the industries that will float away in that sort of big wild ocean where they're no longer
sink.
They're no longer relevant because people don't engage with them. Because
ghost ships. Let's use that one.
And it could be that way. And obviously, bigger organizations take time to react and change. So I think big broadcasters, public service broadcasters, big commercial broadcasters, they will have internal processes that don't allow them to be as nimble as a lot of smaller production companies, for example. So we're like those little speedboats or jet skis even, who are nipping around trying things. And we've always had to be nimble. We've always had to be innovative and creative. I remember when we did The Apprentice in Ireland, we had to come up with a whole new funding mechanism just to make the show. It hadn't been done in Ireland before. And we didn't have the answers. We didn't even know we had to do it. We were left with this, how do we make this show with this particular broadcaster who at the time their budgets for programming just were not at the same level that they were in the national broadcaster. So we had to look at, well, what are our options? Where could the resource come from? Where could the commercial value in this be? And I think the same thing is starting to happen now in the social media world and digital media world. I think there is now some value propositions which A, they're not recognised, B, they're not being utilised, C, people are not actually, I suppose, fully recognising the connection between that individual connection, the data that an individual wants to release. Whether the individual knows about the data release is another thing, but there is a huge value in all of this, and in all walks of life, whether it's in biotech or in the arms race or in the food industry, the technology and the ability to hoover data and then pivot your service to all of that data is starting to influence what gets made. And I think the same thing needs to happen in our world of content. One thing's for sure, I think more and more people are consuming more and more content on more and more platforms. One of the things I think will actually save the content is, I think there's some people will want higher level, and some people will want just strong storytelling, but as they're watching it, they want to be able to watch it at the best possible experience. There are a huge amount of people will put up with lower level quality, but when you really want to sit down and you're sitting on the couch and you're trying to gather a couple of friends or family, you probably want to watch on the big screen. You probably want to watch it on 4K or whatever, the highest quality you can, together, to have that sort of reaction. People do it with sport. You probably find watching a football match or rugby match on your own not as fun, as much fun, should I say, as watching with a group of friends or a pub full of friends, or obviously at the game itself. So I think that's true for an awful lot of activities in terms of our world of what it is, frankly, just different forms of entertainment. And I think entertainment is something that is consumed and used better together. Gamers might disagree, but even gamers are now connecting. So they started out as people who sat in their bedroom probably playing a game and getting proficient at it and sharing their high scores with their friends. Now they want to play with their friends. They don't want to maybe engage with them, but they certainly want to do things together. The element of competition, the element of being able to discuss or see as live what's going on. If you're looking at humans as an anthropological study, there are certain characteristics which, even with the speed of change in digital world, the human beings don't change as quick. So our ability to still want to follow good story, simple narrative, is always going to be innate there. And I think that's what we're trying to do in our world. We're branching out into the world of TV drama and feature film, and trying to connect ourselves to the market that is international. I think the big icebergs that are coming, frankly, haven't even entered the race. When you think about the people who are now commissioning and buying and paying for content internationally, it started out back in the 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s as the big studios for cinema and the big TV networks for TV. That world has certainly moved a hell of a lot since then. And the world we're now seeing, where you've got the big disruptors to TV, being the likes of Netflix, Hulu and Amazon in this part of the world, they're interesting. Will they still be there in 10 or 15 years? Who knows? But the interesting companies who haven't not yet entered the content race, Apple, whilst they have a very successful iStore, an Apple store, and they're connected to so many parts of the world, they're not commissioning content today. Google have YouTube. They have, they did try their Google video streams, but they seem to be putting all their video content-wise down the Google route. But they're not commissioning full-length content. I think the YouTube world of content is a slightly different world, and it's interesting that YouTube very much played the first generation of their output was very much people just posting madcap stuff that they filmed on their phone or setups, and it was all short interstitials, and it was never designed to be consumed as episodic returnable content. But now more and more of the quality, high-end, high subscriber-based channels that YouTube are sort of pushing, you can see the difference. So whilst it's still a lot of bite-sized chunks of content, they are moving more to long form, because that's where you're going to get the eyeballs. That's where you're going to get the big eyeballs. Facebook have realized video drives content much more than all of the rest of their services, and the growth of video on Facebook is probably the fastest part of their growth. Especially in a service that is saturated to the degree that how many people have a Facebook account. So where you're going to grow. And certainly I think they're going to have to look at doing some content directly to that network, and bigger, longer form content. Why can't we be the first company to engage and do a Facebook drama or a feature film or major event via Facebook Live? We found remarkable traction when we did some Facebook Live broadcasting on the set of The Voice prior to transmission of The Voice, where our coaches would do some sessions backstage, and it was remarkable to watch the viewership literally grow as you're going live. Technologies like Twitter on Periscope on Twitter, where's that going to go next? Where is Twitter going to go? How are they going to be relevant in a world where content is going to be more important than just the message? And it's a very interesting world. You could sit back and go, oh my God, where's it going, and be very afraid. Or you could sit back and, rub your hands with glee and go, isn't this just like fantastic? We're about to enter Disneyland and we don't know what's behind those gates and what our role is going to be in it. But I think we certainly want to see ourselves as a company who will innovate given the opportunity. A company who will try and change the rules, try and do things differently. But the one thing we will never compromise on, and I think that has to be key, we'll never compromise on quality. We're always going to be seen as, well, they're probably too expensive, we can't afford them. But I think if there's a Shinawil end board on a program, it has to be a sign of quality. It has to be a sign of, like, there's a certain level here that we're not going to dip below. And I think that's going to be the struggle, that struggle between quality and the desire for these new entrants to maybe push the boat out in terms of cost. Just because you can shoot and edit a movie on an iPhone doesn't mean you actually want to, because I think that what you lose in the aesthetics of filmmaking or TV drama making, if you try and go down the route of cutting all costs out, you will lose somewhere in the overall project that is high quality storytelling. And I think that's an exciting world.
Yeah, and there's so many nuggets in that chunk you gave us there. But the quality thing, like you see it with newspapers now, because newspapers obviously were under such threat that they compromised somewhat in quality and became clickbait and became about how many clicks or impressions instead of how many quality users you have or how many repeat visitors or how many signed in visitors you have. But just to go right back to what you said that was so valuable was the data part and building content out of data and what's working or not, because I love what Reed Hastings did, the CEO of Netflix, where he realized back in 2009 or whatever it was that I'm under severe threat here because I do own the pipeline, but I'm under threat because I am so reliant on the content license. And if the content's not there, I won't have an audience and my network effect is screwed. So he goes, okay, I'm going to take a bet. And as you said, I'm going to push the boat out and I'm going to invest in content. And that totally redesigned the model, changed it, and actually probably saved the company initially. But you mentioned Facebook, and I was delighted you did, because the distribution, whoever owns the pipe has the power. Whoever owns that relationship with the audience has the power, coupled with quality content makers, people who create content that's high quality, that's authentic, and that, as you said, the Shinawil N board has a stamp of approval that you will go, this is Shinawil, this is what it means. Because then the Netflixes and the Amazons and the Hulus know that's what I'm going to get. It's like the milkman who delivers every time. And that is such a powerful mix, because it's the exact same as websites. People who have an aggregator site or a vanilla website who's not underpinned by data, who's not underpinned by top quality personalized content, are going to be like those ghost ships out to sea where no advertiser's interested in them. So it's really interesting. And then you talk about as well, embracing the frenemy and embracing the Facebooks and the Googles who may be a threat to so many people. But also, if you use them correctly, you can absolutely revitalize your content, and you use it as a recruitment tool using Facebook Live and those kind of things. Even knowing that Facebook are learning all the time from that, Twitter buying the NFL rights are learning from all that, and then they're kind of going, one day they may just turn on the switch. But from a Shinawil perspective, you're still very relevant in that world if your quality is still high.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we need to try and crack, and we're not there yet, Ireland is a great country in terms of access to all of these key players in that world. So many of them have operations here in Ireland. The content side of their operations, I don't believe are here. So if we want to talk to Facebook about content, the likelihood is that decision's still being made somewhere in the States in terms of the R&D side of their business. I could be wrong. If there's somebody out there who, from Facebook who want to talk to us about content, I'm there. Similarly with Netflix, I had the pleasure of meeting Reed Hastings once. One of our shareholders, one of our dragons, a couple of years ago, Sean O'Sullivan, was a first round funder of Netflix. So when they launched here in Ireland, he was able to introduce me to Reed. Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to engage on the level I would love to now that we know where our plans are going. And it is interesting that they've moved into Netflix originals, as have HBO before them. I think they were following that sort of model of HBO. Amazon are a really interesting case. I think Amazon are, obviously, they're a very, very big organization, usually dealing with selling people, started out from books into other goods and services. But they certainly want to engage with their clients, with their individual customers, and give them everything they want in their world. And content is now such a key part of that. Amazon Prime is one of the key drivers to grow their business. And not last year, but the year before, I think it was Amazon Prime, a network that is only available in 4 major territories, North America, USA and Canada, UK, Germany and Japan. Now it obviously will roll out further. Commissioned 71 pilots. And those pilots are probably all cost somewhere north of $5 million. That's a lot of investment. And they went to series with over 40 of those shows. And interestingly, they went to series with the shows that the data back from their subscribers was above a certain level of positivity. So they didn't have people in ivory towers with qualifications called commissioners making decisions on behalf of their customers. They let the customers decide. It's dangerous to some. It's revolutionary to others. But for me, I think it's certainly something that we want to do more of. We set up with Sean O'Sullivan. Actually, we set up a development arm called Makers TV, where we invited people in with ideas to develop their ideas in a hothouse scenario. He had done it with tech companies, so he was adamant that we should be able to do it with TV ideas. And it's a process where we're still going through a couple of those ideas with people. We learned a lot along the way. We also then, using Facebook, we set up a development call out in partnership with a distributor in Israel called TV by the People. And we did a call out just for TV ideas. And the qualification to discuss those ideas and be involved in the development group on those ideas was entry. So you had to submit an idea to qualify to be in the closed Facebook page. That then, once we started whittling down the ideas, it was that group who themselves got involved in talking about the ideas, giving feedback, lots of it, on how the ideas might work better and pivot and change. And eventually the idea that won, which we're currently still evolving, still pitching to various people, but it was an idea which came, from one individual who heard about the idea, pitched in an idea, and it went through the different stages. Now, I think a lot more of that's going to come on. So much so that people will just get more involved with the whole creativity role that is the world of film and television. Who's to say the next great TV series or movie franchise is not sitting in somebody's bedroom in their head, and they're not part of our world. They haven't been a writer, but they could have the most innovative story, because again, that's what will be on the page initially, that people want to see or hear. J.K. Rowling created a franchise which the world has celebrated and enjoyed and consumed in millions, and in terms of value, in billions. Somewhere, someday, she had an idea. And that's all it was. And somewhere, someday, she had the ability to actually get it to the next stage. I think those stages are now disappearing. And now people can literally just pitch it. We're open for them. We're looking for them. And we know that it could come from anywhere. And I think, again, if you're not open to it, it won't happen. And that's the difference, I think, between people who have an eye in the future and the people who are living in the past. We don't know who our collaborators are going to be in the future. The only thing we can try and do is bring our experience to bear on the ideas and look to work with the very, very best, industry professionals in trying to make these things. But all in all, there are no rules to that entry point. And I think if you start putting up those rules, they're the people who will be left behind.
Yeah, and so for people who wanted to get in touch, Larry, how can they get in touch?
Well, we will have a new website. We're working on a new website, and on that, people can connect directly to the company from the website. It's amazing amount of people who find me on Twitter and Facebook and everything else. So look, I live, half of my life is quite public from that point of view because of the nature of the business. I'm not the type that leads every single little action of my day on social media, but it's for somebody who sort of grew up in an age without social media. It's funny how I've managed to let it infiltrate my life so much, but it's there, so you can't fight it. If it's there and you can't fight it, use it. So that's how people find me.
Okay, well, Larry Boss, CEO and founder of Shinawil Productions, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Aidan.
So now in the Innovation Show, we welcome Stephen O'Leary, CEO and founder of Olytico. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
Before we talk about Olytico and the mindset behind the company, etc., it'd be great to talk about you and how you came up with the company.
Yeah, it's an unusual route. I think every entrepreneur usually has an unusual route to setting up their own business. I studied to be a journalist. That was my degree, and I thought I wanted to be a journalist, and really enjoyed the course in Griffith College. And I actually lecture in journalism there now at the moment part-time. So I've very fond memories of it. And I went on to work in the industry. I worked for the Irish Examiner for a year in Cork, and an opportunity came up with a Scandinavian company in Dublin called Meltwater. And I didn't really know what I was getting into, but the opportunity sounded exciting. And I worked with them for 2 years and essentially sold a piece of software. They had a media monitoring tool that tracked international news coverage. So I was with them for about 2 years. I worked in Dublin and London and Amsterdam and really enjoyed it. And then went almost 90 degrees in terms of the career because an opportunity came up to be a sports agent on the European Tour and the PGA Tour with a startup in Dublin who had just come into being through a former tour pro and an accountant. And I did that for a year, and it was during the course of that year that the idea, I suppose, began to form that there was a gap in the market, somewhere between what I had been doing for the Scandinavian firm, but really focusing in on the service as opposed to the software.
Yeah, so it became less about the software doing all the work and the person doing all the work, because it's something we see quite a lot where somebody will buy a SaaS product and it'll just sit there and they'll pay the monthly charge and they won't use it. And it's almost like they need the human element of a nudge, but also being sent the meaningful information, because often somebody has the technology, but they don't even know how to use it effectively.
Yeah, I think the best way for me to think about it is when you were in college or even in secondary school and you had a presentation to do, there was always one person in your class who was really good at PowerPoint. Everyone knows that person. There was always that person in the class, and everyone had PowerPoint. Everyone had the software. Everyone had Office usually on their computer. So it's not that anyone was restricted from actually accessing it, but this person had used this software much more often, and it became a growing thing. So the more they used it, the better they got. You know, they could put in the slick transitions and they could make things appear, and it was always good. And in lots of ways, the position Olytico finds itself in is something similar in that we license some of the best software in the world in terms of social listening. We've built a bunch of our own proprietary tools as well. But really, why our clients work with us is that they could go out and buy a lot of the software that we use, but the insights and the time saving are the key difference. So to your point, I mean, it's not that you can't go and get the software itself, but increasingly people don't have the time. You know, for our clients, social media analysis is usually one of 100 things that they have to do in their marketing role or their communications role or their sales role. So it's important to them, but they don't have the time to go off and learn how to use this new piece of software.
And that's one of the key things we see is like you need to get your hands dirty to learn how to do any of this. Like, I mean, you can't read the manual, or you can't read a few white papers or case studies and go, yeah, I'm up to speed. You have to get involved. It's the only way. And, you know, yes, educating yourself a little bit is good, but the deep understanding comes from being involved and being immersed in it. But, you know, one of the things, Stephen, I saw you speaking in Google one day, and you gave a great talk about social listening. And can we talk about that? Because I just think the audience would find that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the work we do and the time we spend is tracking what's being said about our own clients. So what are people saying about them, or their products or their services, maybe their competitors? But it's pretty straightforward in terms of the kind of things they want to listen to. But outside of that, we have opportunities to listen to wider conversations, broader topics and things that are of interest to us. And about 5 years ago, when we had almost no clients, but lots of time, we were talking in the office about the idea of invention and this idea of, you know, where do the best ideas come from and what happens when you ask questions of your audience. And through the conversation, what came across was that, yes, people can give very good suggestions when you ask them questions. So for example, we're thinking of designing a new car, what feature would you like to see? And they might offer you a whole host of different things that they would like to see. But quite often the best ideas come out in that moment in which someone is experiencing discomfort or annoyance or frustration. So the way we often express this, and you'll hear this every day in conversation, is, God, I wish there was a way to, or if only I could, or if only someone built, or why hasn't someone invented? So we kind of brainstormed in the office, and there was about 10 key phrases that came through. And we started to listen to see where these phrases were appearing on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn and so on, and what were the extensions of the sentences. So what was it after I wish someone invented? People were saying. And, as I say, we started this in 2012, late 2011, early 2012. And over the last 4.5, 5 years, we've built up a repository, I suppose, of between 2 and 3 million results or pieces of content where people have finished those sentences. And what's fascinating is that the kind of things people dreamed of or wished for 4 or 5 years ago, we're now seeing come into everyday use.
So can we talk about a couple of those? Because one of the interesting ones was the M&M's color sorter. Because I was at an event, a science for kids, a kind of Coder Dojo event, and there was a lot of kids doing this, and they're like, "Yeah, I've built this M&M or Skittles color sorter," and it was all whatever had a variation of colors, they'd build a sorter of it. And I was like, the first place I heard of that was Stephen O'Leary's presentation a few years back.
Yeah, it's probably one of the lighter ones, and it's lovely. Skittles and M&Ms are strange things in that a lot of people will talk about their favorite colors, and their favorite flavor. I love the purple ones, or I love the red ones, or I love the yellow ones. And the extension of that is, God, I wish I could buy a packet of yellow only, red only, blue only, whatever it might be. And what we found was that not only did people want to buy packets that just had a particular color in them, but then they were saying, God, I wish there was a way of sorting these automatically, and variations of this sentence. And someone built a 3D printed version of a Skittles sorter. And it's if you Google Skittles 3D printer color sorter, you'll find this pretty quickly. There's some great videos up there, and essentially you pour your M&Ms into it, and a little laser identifies the color of the sweet and starts popping them into their different little segments. And it's that's on the very light side, and lots of the things people talk about are light, but it's sometimes the lightest things can turn out to be really important too. So one thing we saw was around heat and temperature. It's a big thing in Ireland, particularly. So we saw loads of people talking about cold pillows. So this came through repeatedly. I wish someone invented a permanently cold pillow. Why hasn't someone built a permanently cold pillow? You must be able to buy a permanently cold pillow, because we know that experience. You're in bed, it's warm, and your pillow starts to heat up. So what you do is you turn it over, and you get that cool side of the pillow for a while, and it's lovely. But then you warm up on that side and you turn it, and the original side hasn't cooled down, and then your head is just hot. So the Chillo was invented, and you can now go and buy a permanently cold pillow. So we saw this, we laughed at it, it works well in a presentation. But subsequent to the presentation, someone was talking to me, and they said, those Chillos actually serve a pretty important purpose. And they said that in chemotherapy, quite often regulating your body temperature is a difficult thing to do, and particularly in the face. And what you find is that sleep, as a result, can be difficult. So having a permanently cold pillow, something that actually enables sleep, that helps with recovery and all of these things, actually has a really tangible, important purpose. And so out of this very kind of flippant, I wish I had a permanently cold pillow, came this kind of use in a medical situation.
Yeah, and if you think, a lot of people think of social media in particular as an input where they push their message to the audience. It's a push medium, but in fact it's a pull one, because if you analyze, like you're doing with Olytico, analyze those type of things. So the marketing opportunity for the M&Ms or Skittles or any of those, if they're looking at those kind of questions, looking for the right questions, then the opportunity is immense, because you can create a marketing campaign out of it. You could have gone to market and gone, the first people to invent this win X, Y, Z, whatever it is, and totally turn it on its head. And that's a lot of the work you've done as well with Olytico.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, the analogy that's probably easiest again to kind of remember with this is when you go to a party and you go in, you always know that person in the party who just does nothing but talk. And very quickly, that person isn't very popular at the party. We meet them at networking events too. That person who just pushes and pushes and pushes. But what's always nice is the person who will actually listen and have conversation with you. Social media is exactly the same. You know, it's full of people in parties who just want to tell you their story. They want to push that information to you. Very few people are very good at the listening side and taking a step back. But if you can put to one side telling your story and instead listen to what people are saying, there's a wealth of information out there. And to your point, you know, marketeers have an incredible opportunity and some are capitalizing on it. You know, we see that on a regular basis. Companies, particularly large companies, starting to hone in on the fact that people don't always ask for their company. Instead, they describe the problem they're having. So they might mention your brand name, but they'll describe the problem that your great product solves. And the companies that are starting to listen to those conversations are now beginning to join them and say, hey, I'm really sorry to hear this is happening. Do you know we've got product X, Y, or Z? This solves your problem. You know, can we set you up with a demo or can we sort you out with something?
And it's one of the reasons I thought it was so good to have you on the show, Stephen, is so many of our startups are, you know, creating products, but you know, it's good to know there's a gap in the market, but is there a market in the gap in that? Do people actually want that product? It's so important, such an important question to ask for startups. But, you know, it's often so many of the entrepreneurs that have come on the show have spotted a problem and went, I'm actually going to fix it because no one else is. And then they go and create a successful product. But what you're saying is brands now are starting to tune into that finally and going, actually, this is a brilliant opportunity to just listen. And Olytico gives them that opportunity to get, you know, and you might be training the trainer in a lot of cases where you get in, you go, listen, this is the kind of work you do. And then they can take it on themselves in the future, perhaps. Yeah,
and we like bigger brands and organizations are getting good at this in lots of different ways. I mean, we see sort of, for example, in-house incubators now that a number of major firms offer where they're essentially investing at very early stage in seed startups. And they'll back 5, 10, 15, 20 of these companies, but sometimes it's actually under their roof. They have a section of their building. And, you know, the hope is that 1 or 2 of those companies go on to either become a successful part of the bigger company or the bigger company's at least got a stake in this very early stage business. Social listening is very similar in that there's a wealth of ideas out there and suggestions. And to your point about the market and the gap, the key thing is quantifying how big the problem is.
Yeah.
Because people will moan all the time. And it's very different between someone giving out and being unhappy with someone willing to actually buy a product or a service that solves that problem. So it's not enough to find the random piece of content that gives out about something. What you're looking for is, well, how frequently does that occur? So we saw, for example, in terms of that frequency model, on Saturday nights and Sunday mornings, an awful lot of people requesting an unsend my text option on their mobile phones. You know, so we know that if you marketed that to the right audience at the right time, probably Saturday nights and Sunday mornings, and you're a major mobile phone provider or a mobile phone maker, that's the kind of service that would be lapped up. You know, you can do it with your email. The recall button exists. Gmail have got that 5-second window to allow you recall without even the person realizing. Introduce that into text messaging and you've got this ready market of people who want it.
And again, like we talk about this, and the way to test that is a little test bed and go, okay, well, just test it in, because you can on mobile. I'm just going to test it in Dublin, or I can test in Kilkenny and just see where like a good test bed is, that I don't have to upset everyone with the feature straight away, but I can actually go and then measure the behavioral analytics of, is it used, is it not? But like WhatsApp did that, and then, you know, everybody started using WhatsApp for that reason.
Yeah, and again, sometimes it's sort of fairly major technological issues like that, let's say, but quite often too, it can be small, coming back to the Skittles idea, small marketing ideas. You know, we saw people celebrating are wishing that there was an option in their cars for the windscreen wipers to wipe in time with the music they were listening to on their radio.
Everybody wants that, man.
Everybody wants that. And there's a group on Facebook who celebrate when this has happened.
This show is over. I'm going to go and set up that business.
Exactly. Well, someone on a hacking website went and actually built a prototype, made a video and ran with it. But if you think about the amount of money the major car manufacturers spend, for example, on their 30-second spot during the Super Bowl, you imagine how much that airtime costs. Even closer to home, primetime television slots, and how generic and boring some of that content often is. I would lap up a 60-second or 120-second piece of content where I saw the engineers at Nissan or Ford making, prototyping and running with a piece of kit that had the windscreen wipers wiping in time with the music. Not because it's going to make me go out and buy the car tomorrow, but you want your brand to be top of mind? That will make it top of mind. Will I share that video in my Twitter feed, on LinkedIn, on Facebook? Without a shadow of a doubt. And it's one of the simple things that we saw coming through, but these are being churned out on a daily basis.
Yeah, and we talk about the death of the water cooler. I mean, people used to in the old days stand around the water cooler and talk about, did you see the show last night? Did you see Dallas? Did you see what Bobby Ewing did? And that those days are gone. But now they're happening on social. And to your point about if one of your clients did that with the window wipers, then people will start talking about that and going, did you see that thing? And then some people actually think it's real and actually tell people, did you see so-and-so are doing wipers in time with the music? It's funny, I was thinking to myself, a future where I have an AI-driven car and it's going, check this out.
Yeah.
And starts doing
and it wants to just impress you.
Machine learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's something you might like. And it's funny because another thing we often hear a lot of is that is about the death of traditional media. Much like the water cooler conversation doesn't happen, will we have newspapers in 5 years' time? Will there be, TV or radio and so on? Or is everything going to be social and digital and online? And if you look even at the last 24 hours, so major cultural event in Ireland from a, let's say, arts and culture point of view is the Roads of Tralee, and sporting-wise is Dundalk's Champions League qualifier. Now, those were two televised events, and two of the most talked about events on Twitter for a whole host of reasons. But the conversations on Twitter were driven by what people were watching on television. And equally, when people saw the conversations on Twitter who weren't watching, they often tuned in. So there is a role for all of these types of media in this. And I definitely think what we're going to see more of is television stations, radios, newspapers getting better at social listening and using this in their broadcasts and in their shows, because that's the way they're going to remain relevant and move from the traditional broadcasters as we imagine them to more of that two-way conversation that everyone now is familiar with on social.
And it's funny you say that, because you think years ago, and there was everybody's talking about second screening and that kind of thing, but it's never been, I haven't seen it really done well, like the conversational inclusion on the main show. So on the TV show, the broadcast show, really including it well, where it's real time. It almost needs to be real time, because we're in the age of the trialogue where the brand puts out the message and then it's the conversation between the public that is actually what the gold is now. And we see it with Twitter buying the NFL rights to Thursday night football, that they are understanding that, and they're kind of going, actually, you know what, we need to start moving this way. And more we're going to see more and more that we see Facebook Live, because they're actually going, and Facebook launched their sports product last year, which is actually collating everything around sports, and they went for those NFL rights. So there's a future coming there where it's actually these guys who have an insatiable appetite for stock, improving stock prices. And I suppose if you're an investor, an early investor in Facebook, you're kind of going, give me more. Every quarter it's getting better and better. And that will dry up in time, and they have to find other ways to eat into other revenue streams. So on the flip side, a broadcaster should be very cognizant of that world.
Yeah, and I think the critical point in all of that for me is the real-time element, and the engagement with the audience and as close to real-time as possible. Traditionally that would have been polls. 51% of you think this and 49% of you think
Phone
that.
polls, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not a huge leap to start taking social content and incorporating it more into broadcasts. And again, we're getting there. I think sometimes we can be, I suppose, a little bit hard on traditional media in so much as a lot of social and digital media is still relatively new. And we're kind of learning by doing here in terms of what works, what doesn't, what does the audience want. But certainly if you look at Periscope, for example, and that ability to live broadcast and in real time, not only see what people are saying, but as you're broadcasting, the comments are coming up and you're expected to converse with those who are commenting. So when someone says this is a great broadcast, you don't 10 minutes later say, John just sent us in a message saying great broadcast. As the great broadcast appears on screen, you're looking at the same screen saying, that's John over in Manchester. Thanks for the message, John. Really glad you're enjoying the broadcast.
Exactly.
But it breaks. And so John feels like he's in the room, that he's part of it. This is the gap or the area in which, social listening and broadcasting and the more general public is going to come together.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of who gets it right first.
Yeah. It's actually funny because in a previous role, I was trying to implement this where it was like you had a member of the staff on radio as a concierge for the public. So it was like, you go to a website and it's like, can I help you pop up? Almost like that, where it's basically like a spider's web for people that are interested and pull them in, and they go, oh my God, that's actually going straight to the presenter, because when that happens, like it's probably going to be a salvation in a way, or at least keeping broadcast media relevant, in real-time broadcast media relevant, because it's going to get tougher and tougher unless this happens.
Yeah, and I think one of the major challenges, people are going to face with this is the filtering process. So again, you go back. That
was the big challenge actually. Where everybody had.
And you look at even the first night of the Rose of Tralee on Monday. We tracked about 35,000 pieces of content over the course of the broadcast that mentioned the actual competition or some of the roses. Now, that's a huge volume of content to have to sift through and identify what's the absolute noise and what's bubbling to the top as being valuable. And there's a combination of both services, but also software that's getting more sophisticated and starting to be able to pick that content out so that the poor broadcaster isn't served 100 pieces of content a minute that they've got to just scroll all the way through, but instead it's beginning to come out that, those nuggets, those really insightful pieces, the funny pieces of content, the stuff you want to share. As that starts to make its way to the top and as the technology catches up with that, you're going to see, I think, far more sophisticated use during live broadcasts in particular of social content and what people are saying.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Stephen O'Leary, CEO and founder of Olytico, thanks for coming into us.
Not at all, my pleasure.
So just last question, where can people find you? Because we didn't ask you.
Yeah, well, we're on Twitter, obviously. We have to be. At Olytico, it's Olytico. You can follow us on LinkedIn. It's where we share a lot of our content. We have a newsletter you can sign up for on the website, olytico.com. That's it.
Thanks a million.
Not at all.
Cheers, Stephen. So now on the Innovation Show, we welcome Karen Hennessey, Chief Executive of the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland and CEO of ID 2015. Welcome to the show, Karen.
It's great to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me in.
You're very welcome. And I saw the work you were doing, and I've admitted to you, I've put my hands up, mea culpa, that I wasn't aware of the amazing work you're doing until I saw an article about this work, and I just thought it's so important in the grander scheme of things that it'd be great to get you on the show and tell people about the work you do. So we'd love to hear it.
Oh, thank you. And I feel I've failed somewhat that you've missed on the year of Irish design.
It's my fault. Head in the sand.
No, not at all. Look, I was incredibly privileged to be working with the most amazing people last year, and we're continuing it into this year on the Year of Irish Design. So it was a government-led initiative that came out of the Global Irish Economic Forum in 2013, where there was an idea, let's have a Year of Irish Design. It was about celebrating all forms of design, be it animation, be it architecture, medical devices, engineering, craft, fashion, organisational service, food design, you name it. And we wanted to tell the world about what Ireland is doing in relation to design. And that's what the year was about. We brought Irish design out to 150 different places across the world. So we had 150 events globally, but we had about 500 events here in Ireland. And when I say we, it was the design sector working with many different agencies. So the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland were asked to lead it, but we worked with the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Enterprise Ireland, IDA, Science Foundation Ireland, RAI, you name it. We had over 80 different agencies working with us, really profile what's brilliant about Ireland in terms of creativity. We've a huge heritage, we've a huge DNA when it comes to design in Ireland, to crafts in Ireland. But we haven't gone out and we haven't told that story for many years, really since the time of the Kilkenny Design Workshops. Again, another government-funded initiative, but that was back in 1963, that it had a huge impact on both design in Ireland, but also design internationally. And that's what we wanted to do again with the Year of Irish Design. So it was about bringing all forms of design out through design weeks. So we were in Milan, New York, Eindhoven, through architectural biennales. Ireland was the inaugural country in focus for the entire month of June in London. The Chicago Architectural Biennale, the Hong Kong Shenzhen Architectural Biennale. Through Fashion Weeks, we took part in the London Fashion Week in February of last year, in September of last year. Through international trade events, we brought designers and makers to Maison in Paris, to New York Now in New York, and to London Design Festival. And in 1 week alone, we brought over 70 companies to London, and that was to showcase what Ireland is doing. And the incredible thing was that the embassies got behind us. We'd over 30 different events in Irish embassies across the world. Again, be it photographic, be it capsule exhibitions, showcasing and telling the story of Irish design.
Yeah, and it was funny because when you're talking about it there, I thought I've lived abroad. And it's not until you actually move abroad that you appreciate what you've had. It's, you know, the Joni Mitchell song, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. But it's very true. And I notice a lot with the Irish diaspora and a lot of expats that they're way more immersed in Irish culture than we are when we're here. And I know it's a human trait, but the work you've done is really bringing it to a head. And I suppose from a selfish perspective of wanting to see innovation and change management thrive, you know, the work of design and spaces and clean spaces and, you know, inspiring spaces and art and all these things are so important to creativity. And it's often overlooked, and you have drab buildings, a lot of lack of creativity, and those things do affect how people work. People work better when they're surrounded by creativity or art or music and all these kind of things. They have an absolute effect on how somebody performs.
You're absolutely correct. And being surrounded by beautifully designed and styled products is very important. But for me, I suppose design goes way beyond that. It's not just about styling. It's not just about how something looks. It's about how something performs. And that's why I was delighted to come onto this show, because for me, design is the key ingredient when it comes to innovation. It's that piece where it marries why a human being will want to either purchase your product or to use your service. So you can have great technology, but it's that marrying what someone wants with a product or service. And that's the role that I believe design plays.
Yeah, and some of the work you've done is to bring that to the fore, and it's really interesting when you talk, because I have a little glimpse into your background and very much KPI driven. Can we talk about that, because you are very KPI driven with this, because even the interviews you've done, you talk about the investment and the output. It's not like, oh, that was nice and fluffy, we did this event, so you're a bit of very strict. This is what we did, this is what came out of it, and this is the results, and this is where we're going next. Very, very focused.
I think one of the key successes of last year is that we went into the year with a very clear performance metric. We had, and some people hate the words, but we had very clear metrics or key performance indicators. They were around jobs, they were around exports, they were around the number of new startups, they were around the number of companies we were going to bring out internationally. And to all the world, we could hang our hat on each of those metrics at the end of the year. Every single one of those we delivered on, and in some cases we doubled. We said we were going to do 10 million exports. We actually did 25 million. And when you add all that together, we received 5 million from the Irish government to deliver on this year. And we delivered 54 million in economic value. And we're one of the few design organisations in the world that has these very clear metrics. And now we can build on that. I can go back into government and say, this is what investing in design means, and this is why you need to invest in design. To me, as you mentioned, my background is I do come from a kind of an economical background, and I was involved in. I'm an accountant by background. I worked in.
Boo.
I know. I was actually.
This interview is over, Karen.
I'm very proud. To
You
be,
never told me that.
an accountant. I worked in mergers and acquisitions for many years for a company called Glambia. Give my old company a plug, but they were always metric driven and deliverable, and what you're delivering. And it's no different in this industry, and it's no different when you're working with government. They need to be able to show a return. And the beauty of it is this sector delivers in spades, so that we shouldn't be ashamed of it. We have an awful lot to tell people about. One of the key things I wanted to deliver out of last year was, what was the size of the sector? What are we dealing with here? And actually, the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation did a huge amount of research into this, and they published in January of this year our policy framework for design and enterprise in Ireland. And what that's saying is that the design sector in Ireland is worth an astonishing 38 billion in exports. Wow. Now that figure is that's 20% of all exports. And where that's coming from is that 37 billion relates to digital design, but the balance of it, 1 billion, relates to all other forms of design, be it architecture, engineering, craft, animation, fashion, graphic design. So we have a huge sector, but we didn't know that until January of this year. So it's really important that we build and we continue to invest in this sector. So since then, the government have asked the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland to write the National Design Strategy for Ireland, working with the key stakeholders, the key agencies, and we're in the midst of doing that. We're hoping to publish that in September of this year.
And I'm sure you can see it straight. Like there'll be metrics in there.
There absolutely will be.
But it's great to have you involved because of that, and it's rare to have that mix of art, left and right brain, if you will, or art and science together in one person. It's usually a team of people who come together. So it's fantastic. But one of the things I want to ask you was, I found it interesting. You said 37 billion from the digital. So what is that? What does that consist of? The 37 billion.
Well, digital design encompasses an awful lot. If you look at what IBM are doing, what Microsoft are doing, actually, IBM are a really interesting company. They've really changed their strategy around design over the last number of years. They have now a general manager for design that leads from Austin, Texas, but Ireland has been selected as one of their key places to develop design. And they opened a design lab last year in time with the Year of Irish Design. But when you see what they're doing, they're now investing in design. So for every they had about 80 product engineers. They're now going from one designer to 80 product engineers to one designer to 13 product engineers. And when you look at mobile technology, it's 1 to 3. So you can see their investment in design. It's all about user experience. It's all about usability. And you're seeing that not only in companies like IBM, but you're looking at companies, it could be food companies, it could be Kerry Ingredients, it could be Glanbia, it could be companies like Horseware in Dundalk who are producing products for animals. But again, it's about
design thinking,
and embedding design thinking. And you're seeing that across many of the different companies right across the spectrum. So I suppose what we're beginning to look at is not just design as it relates to design companies, but design as it relates to non-design companies.
Yeah, and it's so important what you say, because it's great when you see, and I'm not talking about the IBMs of the world, but you talked about horseware there, and when you see companies that are considered traditional companies embracing it and embracing that this is not about, you can't just, it's not the world of create a product, put a load of marketing and advertising behind it, and then the users will buy it in spades. Because there's so much choice in the world, it has to be built from the user's experience upwards. So it's like, how are they using it? Consistently reviewing that over and over again, and that's where the design thinking comes into its own.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's what we're talking about in relation to design thinking is, and it's that I have an absolute strong belief if more companies starting engaging with design use within their companies and design thinking, we're going to change fundamentally how Ireland is positioned. We rolled out, in conjunction with the local enterprise offices, design for growth vouchers last year, and they're continuing into this year. And again, it's getting small businesses looking to bring design thinking, so marrying them up with designers and seeing what impact that can have to their businesses. And what we would like to see is that rolled out across the entire country. So we're working with the local enterprise offices to see that happen. The same with Enterprise Ireland. Last year, they had competitive startup fund just for design companies. And again, seeing how when design companies get the opportunity, how they can perform just as well as any other business out there. But it's that really the sweet point for me is when you get general companies adopting design thinking and how that can fundamentally change their approach to problem solving, to thinking about the user experience, and to the deliverability of their products and services.
And on that, because this is one of the things I thought was like so many startups, I suppose that everybody's so busy working in the business, sometimes they're not working on the business, and they don't have their radar on for opportunities like this. So a lot of startups and founders and CEOs listen to this show. So can they get in touch, and you mentioned the vouchers there. So somebody who may be funded already in the NDRC or the Dog Patch Labs or somewhere, can they get in touch and access some of this funding, or how does that work, Karen?
Well, there's a lot of funding out there already, and I think it's actually for design-led companies to be aware that that funding is available for them, but they've got to push it forward themselves.
Yeah.
So, be it Enterprise Ireland, be it the local enterprise offices, be it ourselves in the Design and Crafts Council, people need to push themselves forward and go forward, not to be afraid to go forward for that funding. Where we can, we like to see specific funds with a design hat on it. But over time, I'd like to see those mainstream. So you're not looking for a specific fund that has design in the title, but that you as a company, if you're in the design space, you know that you can access any funding that's out there to help grow your business. And
so for example, I always I'm a huge Apple fan, not for the actual products that I keep breaking, but for the fact that they put so much time into every aspect of the product, from software and hardware, owning that whole end-to-end product. But one of the things I thought was so good is that and I know Steve Jobs was a bit OCD with this, but his focus on the unboxing and these kind of things. I mean, that's design as well, isn't it? So it's how the product looks, how it looks on the shelf, the branding of that product, but also the unboxing and the experience of that. Does that fall under the remit?
No, it does, absolutely. And you're talking about startups and you're talking about small companies. I mean, a lot of the times these companies have to do absolutely everything themselves, from the packaging to the website, to the branding, to the production of the goods. But at all times, that design ethos or that design styling and flair and thinking needs to go from the very beginning right the way throughout. And it's, in a way, it's standards, it's quality, but it's also understanding what your customer wants is the biggest piece. And we're seeing many companies beginning to look at this, from financial services companies. If you're looking at, Accenture, PwC, KPMG, any of the kind of the technology consultants are now looking at user experience in terms of design as a key USP for their own businesses. And if they're looking at it, you may be sure we're all on that. It's mainstream.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
So no, I find that really interesting because one of the things I see often is you have a great product, a great founder behind it, driven. Maybe, we talked about the right brain, left brain, maybe brilliant at finance and brilliant at finding funding and leading a team, but have an awful eye for design. And you see that in a horrific website, horrific app, really badly put together, and actually be blind to it. I always think of the X Factor, and when you have the person who's singing and really upset that Simon Cowell slates them and goes, "You're terrible at singing," because they don't see it. They're like, it's equivalent of tone deaf. They're design deaf, and they can't see the fact that this is not good. And it's those people you'd love to almost go, you just need a little nudge in this direction to make that product sing.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I would love that for all the local enterprise offices where they have their evaluation committees, that there's a designer sitting on those evaluation committees. Because I've had the pleasure of being on the Kilkenny Carlow, what was the CEB at the time, and you'd see fantastic products coming in, but they would look awful, and no one's going to buy them. So it's that design component is really important, and in a way, it has to be holistic. It has to be across all business, but it has to be across our public service. It has to be across our education. And that comes from primary, secondary, up to third level education. And that's where Scandinavian countries are stealing the march on us. They're bringing design in from such an early stage. And I think it's a real opportunity. Ireland is a small country. We can impact what we're doing and we can actually change it fundamentally. But it needs to be across education, across enterprise, or across public sector. And that's what we're trying to look at with this national design strategy. It's looking at policy, it's looking at education through to enterprise, it's looking at research and development, but it's also looking at society. It's looking at everything we do, how we building our houses, and our houses can cater from a 2-year-old entering them to an 82-year-old. So it's a different way of thinking, but we need to start in that journey. And we've some great people out there who are I suppose, masters in this. If you look at the O'Donnell Toomeys, architects that built the London School of Economics in London, Grafton architects building the Bocconi Museum in Milan. We just have, as a country, we've got a great flair for design, but we need to embed it across everything we do, from our infrastructure, from our education. But there's huge ability to make that happen. And I suppose we hope that the Year of Irish Design is a really good catalyst to continue investment into the sector.
Karen Hennessey, CEO of Design and Crafts Council of Ireland and the ID 2015. Thank you for coming in to us.
Thank you.
So now on the Innovation Show, we welcome Séamus Byrne, co-founder of UX Ireland. Welcome to the show.
Hi Aidan, how are you today?
Good to have you on the show. Before we talk about the event, UX Ireland event, you were way ahead of the game with UX. It's become this, everybody's talking about design thinking and UX at the heart of and customer first, etc. But you were ahead of this going back to 2011 before it became a la mode as such. Can we talk about the origins of UX Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, for me, it's been a bit of a personal journey in parallel with the actual development of UX Ireland. If I go back to 2007, I'd returned from California. I'd been educated and worked over there in the area of UX. And when I came back to Ireland, I didn't see a lot of it around, and I really missed that kind of my community. So I put the word out, and another chap who's from the UK actually basically got in touch with me, and we founded Interaction Design Association Dublin chapter. And from that, it was just a bit of a roller coaster over the next few years, because the following year we co-founded Diffuse, which is a free design event that's on still to this day during Design Week. and that's a great design event. And then I decided to submit Dublin into an international bid for a conference to be based in Europe. It was the Interaction Conference, and we were competing against the likes of Berlin and Helsinki and the Netherlands and also Paris. And guess what? Dublin won. Our bid won. And so we had a huge international conference here in Dublin back in 2012 called Interaction 12. And that featured about 800 very robust professional designers from all over the world. And I think that put Dublin really on the map. Because before then, I think a lot of the international folks thought, we're known for the more cultural offerings like Riverdance or arts and literary areas, but they didn't really see Ireland as a design space. So since the Interaction Conference in Dublin, I went global then. I ended up being a board member and putting conferences on around the world, and promptly helped with Toronto in 2013, the Interaction Conference in Amsterdam in 2014, and then stepped down off the board for 2015 San Francisco. So I've been in hiatus for about a year and a half, but I'm taking a break from running events and just running the usual design agency. So back in January, a mutual friend introduced me to Software Acumen, a company in the UK who put on UX conferences all the time, like UX Scotland and UX Cambridge, to name but a few. And the reason this mutual contact put us in touch with each other was because they knew that I was interested in putting on an event for Ireland to do UX. And so we were introduced to Software Acumen. So between us, Graphic Mint, the company I work for, and Software Acumen, we've been planning and producing UX Ireland for around the last 9 months. So it's quite exciting to be so close to it now because we put a lot into it.
So you were managing all this as well as the day job. So this was separate stuff as well as the day job.
Yeah, every day I'm in the design world. I'm a generator. There's generators and synthesizers. Generators come up with lots of ideas and brainstorm and design the framework, and the synthesizers deal with like making sure that is actually feasible and realistic. So we've had quite a year because we have a regular studio practice where we do design work, we do research, we do usability testing all the time. And then we actually have a couple of other initiatives. We got UX Academy, which is for training people how to do UX. And then we have UX Ireland, which is a big conference. But what's great about it is in all design companies, there's ebbs and flows. So there's always a lot of projects, and then there's these projects end, and maybe there's a gap of a week or a few days between each project, and this happens across all the designers. So UX Ireland has been great to give extra kind of extra work for people to do in these gaps, and it also gives events are fun. I don't know why designers have this kind of compulsion to run events. We're not trained in how to run events, but there's something about user experience that brings designers to want to actually make the best experience as possible for the attendees. So yeah, it's been quite challenging, but for us, we've been investing in UX and training for a long time. And so it's important that we, I guess, continue that narrative, and we want to be at the forefront of that in Dublin and in Ireland.
I understand what you mean about wanting to ship the event, because it's so rewarding to actually see it executed, but you probably don't necessarily want to see all the details in the spreadsheets to get it there. You come up with the grand vision.
It's really nice to do the vision, and I think literally, if you think of an event, it's I don't know, it's a million things that have to be done. It literally is a giant spreadsheet, isn't it? That's distributed across many people. One thing that I always find after Interaction 12, I remember the feeling after the planning, and then you do 3 days. It was a 3-day event. It was fantastic. It was a great experience. And then the day after, there's no evidence that the event happened. Sure, there's some video files and some great talk on Twitter, but events are very transient. You don't have something to kind of take away, except for wonderful memories, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And it really looks like, I've looked at the website, uxireland.net, and there's so much going on. And like, you can see the depth. It's not like, this is what I really liked about it. And I reached out to you for this reason, was this is not about making money from an event, where you see this a lot of times where it's like, let's put on an event because we're great at putting on events and we'll make some money around it and we'll invite a lot of speakers in. This is built the other way around, where it's built out of a passion, and it's like, the event is almost the output of all the work and the depth and the knowledge. And that really comes across when you look at the site, because you can see that it's got huge depth to it. And Can we talk about the program and the speakers, etc.?
Absolutely, and thanks for what you just said. It is really true. We are very passionate about UX, and we started off at like who are we going to get to keynote at this event? And just through my experience and my network around the world, I saw a lot of over time. I've seen a lot of speakers, great speakers, and for me, in the back of my head, it's always to have an opportunity to bring them to Ireland for two reasons. One is so the local people can benefit from their insight and their knowledge as international speakers with a lot of experience, but also that they can see Ireland as a place that's seriously on the map. So we first approached John Colco, who's basically the executive director of product design at GE Aviation, but which is fantastic. But prior to that, he's worked at Frog, he's worked at Blackboard, and most notably, he's written a lot of books. He's written 4 books on UX design. Everything. His most recent one is about empathy, and his new one that's going to come out is about creativity and managing the chaos of creativity in the enterprise. But one of my most favorite books by him is called Wicked Problems, which is how designers can actually help solve real tragic and horrible social impact problems around the world through design thinking and through UX methodologies. And then our other keynote is Brenda Laurel, who's a distinguished designer. She's been designing stuff since the 70s, and like she brought out the first video game for young girls in the 90s. She's pioneered in virtual reality and augmented reality. She's worked for Atari and Activision and a who's who of early gaming and multimedia companies. She's also written great books called Computers as Theatre. So bringing Brenda Laurel to Dublin is just for me, it's a career moment for me because I think she's fantastic. And she overlaps into gaming, she overlaps into film studies. So we've had a lot of support from those industries too. And then, of course, we have some invited speakers. Frank Long from Front End, another agency in town who are fantastic. We get along wonderfully with them. Benjamin Kaiser, who's director of design at Intercom, who are obviously a high-flying, wonderful Irish success story from the product perspective. And then we got a freelance European UX designer called Anna Dahlstrom coming from London, but she's originally from Sweden. She's representing the freelancers. On top of that, we got about 20 other talks, which were part of a call for speakers selection process over the summer, where we were inundated with applications. And this shows the appetite for UX in Ireland. But from that, we shortlisted 20 speakers who basically crossed the gamut of academia to professional practice, and with a nice variety. I call it a selection box of different kind of talks around user research, user interface design, and user experience strategy. And then we also have some wonderful sponsors I just wanted to mention who have speakers going to the event as well. We have IBM as our platinum sponsor. They're sending 2 fantastic speakers. Accenture are flying in a speaker from abroad who is originally with Fjord Design. We also have many other sponsors too, and a lot of event partners. So we're pretty excited about the program.
You have a couple of tracks going on at the same time, and I'm sure, when you started off back in 2011, you basically put together the event, and as a one-day event, now you're on 2 days and you have multiple tracks, so there must be a certain bit of joy in that.
It's the design. That's such a critical part of a program, and it's the design of the actual multiple tracks. And whenever you do that, it's really the balance. You're thinking of the people who have never heard of UX who are at the conference. You're thinking about the seasoned practitioners who don't want that one-on-one content anymore. You're thinking about balancing workshops versus, I guess, plenary talks versus practical kind of hands-on kind of stuff. So it is a challenge, and we spent. It was over the course of one weekend. Once we had the shortlist, we spent an entire weekend, the program committee, basically juggling stuff around to make sure it worked, and we're pretty happy with the result. I think it's a bingo of the main key areas in UX around the world at the moment.
There's a huge amount of people coming from overseas to this event. It's a destination event. It's not just an Irish-only event, and that's reflected in the amazing speakers that you have coming in. But I was also thinking that, I've worked in this area, and to try and explain UX to some corporate people can be very, very challenging. And it's fine, it's due to events like this that it will help actually translate that message and get people to invest in this, because even today, a lot of people see a website or an app as a thing rather than actually your front door now, more important than your office or your brass plate on your office on the outside your office. This is actually where people will find you now, and UX being such an important part of that.
Absolutely. I think I was having a great conversation with an old friend of mine who's a UX practitioner as well. And we were kind of just shooting the kind of different kind of topics around UX and where it's at right now. And we're both agreed that a lot of the time UX practitioners are brought in at the end of the project when the technology is all built and it's like, hey, now can you make it look good? And we're so not about that. It really, where we start is having empathy for the people who are using it. So we actually advocate before you even touch a pixel that there should be a proper design process there with pencils and sketching and iterations. But most importantly, at the beginning of all that, there's user research where you're actually interviewing real people who are using the product or service or will be, and also watching them use it or watching them use prototypes. So it's getting to the stage where technology is pretty much like pop-up tent, isn't it? Like you press a button and we can do anything. So the innovation isn't really in the technology so much anymore. It's more in how useful and how meaningful and how relevant the products are or services. And that brings us back to that empathy word, the E word. And that's what my friend and I were talking about earlier. We were saying like really the future is in empathy, and it sounds a bit cheesy and a bit soft skills, but really that's where the difference is between someone finding your product useful versus not.
I work in Catawave, and we talk about this as well from a marketing perspective or even a business model perspective, that the empathy is such an important part, that you know that your product or your story behind your product or your brand actually resonates with people and it's empathetic with them, because otherwise it just won't land properly.
Absolutely. And marketing sometimes in UX circles can be given, people shrug at, marketing. But I actually have a marketing book from 1980 called Marketing. And in it, I think chapter 6, you get into, you've got customers and you've got consumers and then you've got end users. So marketing has been, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Marketing's brought a lot to the table for user experience. And especially when you also get into, I guess, the ability to just proactively and confidently just go out and deal with the public and bring them in for usability testing. That's actually quite a skill set in and of itself. It's recruiting, it's meeting and greeting, it's coordination of people, and then of course the capturing that feedback and the synthesis. So it's a big piece of it, So I got a lot of respect for marketing.
Like the recruitment part, I mean, your data that you have coming into the funnel to get the right answers out is such an important part, and therefore the people you recruit to ask the questions to have to be the right people as well.
That's so true. And I've swallowed a dictionary in usability testing at this point. And, the term for that is representativeness, right? And, recently we've had clients who are really pushing us on representativeness. So before it was just, it's good to see that, because before it was like, can you please do some usability testing? And people are like, no, we don't need to do that. But thankfully people are adopting that, even guerrilla style usability testing. People are realizing, getting some feedback from some users is better than nothing. And that's great. So as you start to evolve over time the discipline of usability testing, you start getting into like how accurate is our sample set that we've gotten, and how we kind of got coverage of the different people who use this experience. So it's great to see that.
Yeah, and so this type of stuff, I suppose I wanted to touch on it without going too deeply into it, because I reckon maybe we'll follow up with a separate session another day, an interview about Graphic Mint and going deeper into UX, maybe some of the findings that we have out of the conference. We can go into them, but I just wanted to whet the appetite of the audience for this event, because I think it's great, and it's on in Trinity on the 10th and 11th, which is next week.
So basically, we picked the location because it's very easy to access. It's in the heart of Dublin. It's just right near on Pier Street, right near where Trinity College main campus is, and it's a fantastic new building. It looks like it's a new build. It's really state of the art. It's the Trinity Biomedical Sciences Institute in Dublin. It's our dates for our conference, UX Ireland, are on the 10th to the 11th of November. As you said, we have 2-day tickets. We also have single day tickets. If you can't take 2 days off of work, we have the single day tickets. We also have great group rates. So if you are interested in sending your team along, please do get in touch with me directly through the uxireland.net website. You can find the contact information there, and we can give you some great group rates. We have, looking at the attendee list, we've got a who's who of Irish industry, and so it's going to make for a really good attendee experience.
Séamus Byrne, co-founder of UX Ireland. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Aidan. I appreciate your time. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.